Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. Today I'm starting into something a little bit different because I spend so much time telling you to read the Bible, telling you that the Bible is worth your time to read. And I want to actually give you some evidence, some reasons why the Bible is worth reading. For starters, so many people just view the Bible as like this thing, the Bible. Like it came down from heaven on a string and here is this full compiled thing. That's not it at all. The Bible was written over a period of at least 1500 years by like 40 different authors. It's written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. It was collected, it was saved, it was passed around, it was copied, and it was preserved. The Bible testifies to its own credibility, but it's fair to question that. Like, I could sit here telling you I've got a law degree from Harvard. I don't, but if I say so, like, maybe I'm just saying stuff, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not. And so, can we have something outside of the Bible to lend credibility to the Bible being real? Can we even know that what we have now is what was written in the first place? Or is this something that has grown and become just like added to an its legend that develops over time? Well, actually, we do. So many people who come against it try to put the Bible in like its own special category that needs to have exponentially more proof to be trusted than anything else. Honestly, to me, that's part of the evidence that it's real, is how strongly people want to fight against it and how much they want to like silence it and ignore it and make it go away, and yet it's still here. People make a big deal out of the fact that, like, no, we don't have any of the original writings. Like, when Paul wrote these letters, we don't have any of those actual letters that Paul wrote, but we have copies of them. And frankly, it's copies of copies of copies. But this is standard for history. You need to kind of let me be your nerd friend for a while and take you into some of this. I'm not expecting you to do all the research unless you're a nerd like me and you get excited about that. Caesar wrote the Gallic Wars or commentaries on the Gallic Wars. It's like Bellum Gallicum. I'm not good with Latin. I'm probably not saying it right. Nobody questions that it was Julius Caesar who wrote this book in the first century BC. The thing is, the oldest surviving manuscripts we have of that are from the ninth century. That's like 1,000 years later. And that gap between the original composition and the earliest copies we've got is very common. Like, that's a footnote to historians. That amount of time doesn't really matter because of how the document was treated, how we know it was valued and copied, and people paid attention to it and thought it was worthwhile and took it seriously. The same is exactly true for the Bible, although in fact more so, because the people who were preserving this thought it was the very words of God. Another one of the most popular things from roughly that era of antiquity is the Aeneid, written by Virgil. The earliest copies of anything we have from that are from the 4th and 5th centuries. Once again, nobody is thrown off by that. No one is saying, oh, well, we can't trust the Aeneid. We're not freaking out over that gap of time because we know people preserved it and carefully transmitted it. Neither one of those things have a signature. Like, Caesar didn't finish the book and write his name on it. Virgil didn't finish the Aeneid and write his name on it. But it's always been attributed to that person. There's never been anything throughout history of a person saying, no, 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 he didn't really write it. It was this other guy. That has never happened in antiquity. That's one of the key things that we trust. And there's a lot of like circumstantial corroborating evidence. For both Caesar's commentaries on Gallic Wars and Virgil's Aeneid, they're both written in that author's style. We know it's kind of typical for how that person wrote. We have other things, the other writers from around that time period who attribute the thing to that person and say, oh yes, this person wrote this book, and like they quote it, they mention it, they talk about it when it's other things outside of that book. And speaking of history, the actual things that are talked about specifically in the Gallic Wars, like matches up with what we know of history from other people, the events, the people, the places, it lines up. Just in case you were wondering, everything I've been saying about those two ancient documents is absolutely true, and more so about the Bible. There's never been anyone coming along saying, no, 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 Matthew didn't write the Gospel of Matthew, it was some other guy. That doesn't exist. No sane person has ever challenged the authorship of these documents. There are other writers in that time period that talk about it, that reference it, that quote it. And even the history lines up with what we know of history. And you get into some of the stuff that like I find fascinating. There's the John Rylands Papyrus that's dated to about 125 AD, has a number of fragments of the Gospel of John. John's Gospel was written in about 90 AD. So this is like 30 years later, we've got someone quoting it. That's really stinking close. Remember the Gallic Wars? It was a 1,000-year gap. This is 30 years. The Chester Beatty Papyrus that's dated about 250 AD, so it's So it's definitely longer, but it's still like 15% of the gap that we have for Gaelic wars. And it contains portions of all four Gospels and Acts. It's some of the first physical evidence that we have that these were all collected and copied together, that they were being preserved as a volume. Over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to take you through all four Gospels and show why we can trust the authorship, the content, and the message of each of them. But for now, just get in mind the manuscript evidence for the Gospels is overwhelming. There is a lot of legitimate historical, non biblical evidence to trust that the Bible we have today is the message that was given by these men who gave their lives to share the message that they had received from God. That tells us this is God's message to you and me. That's why we should read the Bible. It is legitimate, it can be trusted, and it can change your life.